informational items. Okay, D1, existing school program options.
I'm providing this item for information based on just questions that we've had regarding the program options at Trustees School. So, Assistant Superintendent Beatrice Titus will be doing our presentation tonight.
Superintendent Martinez, Board President Kim, board members. As Superintendent Martinez indicated, this presentation is in response to inquiries about the Lincoln Elementary program offerings. And I did make some slight revisions to the presentation that you have in your packet, particularly if you're annoyed when I have, for those of you who are annoyed when the projection is different from the actual. There's some change in sequence of slides, there's some slight title changes. So
which one do we focus on?
the one, the handout that you just got, and it'll be on the screen. Okay, so tonight's presentation I'll be addressing two topics. One, providing Lincoln Elementary historical information, and then various data points that we can consider as we consider program options for Lincoln Elementary School. And I just want to know, I believe I'm going to go through the entire presentation and then take any questions at the end of the presentation. So a lot of information gathering took place in preparation for this presentation. It goes through reviews of records, board agendas, minutes, interviews that, in particular, Superintendent Martinez conducted of different administrators and constituents. So what you have before you is a timeline of Lincoln Elementary, the history of Lincoln Elementary, with particular focus on how dual immersion came to be. So what's not noted, here is prior to 2004, there was a bilingual education offered at Lincoln Elementary School. Prior to 2004, you had it in the form of a transitional program, also known as early exit program, because we had students that were English learners and they were provided instruction in their native language of Spanish. Because at that time you had the boundaries that included students from the Hebron Heights area. So prior to 2004, you had an early exit program. But beginning in 2004, the topic of dual immersion came to be through the allocation of a grant. And the grant is considered a FLAP grant, a foreign language assistance program, and it's a federal grant that's awarded to districts. In particular, in this case, two sites within Salinas City, which was University Park and Lincoln Elementary, to expand dual immersion. At that time, it was only offered at Los Padres. So you had various constituents who attended a two-way bilingual conference, which was sponsored by CAGA, California Association of Bilingual Education, and they became informed about what dual immersion program would look like. So, push the button. So, then they weren't able to implement those recommendations because we had the closure of Lincoln Elementary School. So, at this time period, you had the board decide and they consider various factors to close both Lincoln Elementary School and Verona Elementary School, the primary factor being declining enrollment. So the school was closed for a period of 3 years, and under the leadership of Dr. Donna Vaughn, it was reopened in 2008 with the vision of it becoming a school of choice. So that's what you see on the timeline. And that following winter And spring, you had various stakeholders have the conversation about what dual immersion would be like at Lincoln Elementary School. And they had a target date of 2010, 2011, and it did come to fruition, but at a later date in 2011, 2012. So this is part of our information gathering preparation for this presentation. So another data point to consider is enrollment. So I'm sharing with you district-wide enrollment over 2 decades, 1996 to this past year that we just completed. And as you can see, there was, the highest point in the district where we were maybe 200 students, and then there was a decline, a significant decline. And here you have current numbers for the past 2 years with a slight decline. And the decline is follows the pattern that you see statewide. So, Lincoln Elementary School, you also have the 2 decades worth of information, enrollment information. You had a peak, 723, and then you had to define this information was the one that the board used to determine the need to close the school. Then you had the closure for the various years, and then steady upward trends to the present. So the next 3 slides have to do with the types of programs that are offered at Lincoln. The sheltered English immersion program, structured English immersion program, and the dual immersion program. So what you're going to see, and a combination of both. So what's offered here, what's provided here are just various ways to look at the total enrollment for this past year, 15-16. So you have the grade span of K6, and you have a total of 266 students enrolled in the structured English immersion, which the percentage, what it equates to school-wide, and the various types of enrollments, homeschool, inter, school choice. And something that was very interesting as the information was being gathered, when we look at the term homeschool, when the school was reopened in 2008, there wasn't anything that officially designated boundaries. So what we have is what you can access on the website is the various the street names, and the ones that the transportation determined would be the ones in the area of the Lincoln School, but nothing that could be substantiated by board action or anything in the formal process. So that's what we would refer to as homeschool.
I think one of the things, just to add a little something to that, is through my interviews, and my interviews were with the people who opened the school, the people that were involved with the closing of school, the people who were closest to the decision-making process, because we could not find documents or records to indicate, what that was like. But in my conversations with those that I do think are credible sources of information, it was labeled a school of choice. And those were the words that I kept hearing over and over again from those administrators who were the ones who were closest to Dr. Vaughn, and opening it as an opportunity for students from both inside our school boundaries and outside our school boundaries to have a place to them. So it was over and over again, the label, even though we can't find anything formalized for that, was that it was a school of choice.
And in addition to that, prior to the closure, you had students bused in. That's no longer the case, with the exception of the LDC students. The students that attend Lincoln School are, not provided transportation. And so again, the other enrollees are intra within the school district, families within the school district, families inter, families outside of the school district, and then school of choice, which means these are students within our school district boundaries that attend a PI school and would like to attend a non-PI school, which Lincoln is one. So in the dual immersion, you have similar data. So you have, again, the same grade span, total amount of students, total and school-wide. And let me just go back to make this point that all these numbers are not inclusive of the, LDC, which is the Language Development Center students, and the special ed courses or classes that are offered at Lincoln. So these are the K-6 students, not those two programs. So again, similar information, total number of students, the percentage per grade level, percentage per type of enrollee, homeschool, intra, inter, and school of choice. So this this slide is similar information, just a different format. It has the program side by side. And these are, again, 2015-16 enrollment for dual immersion and structured English immersion. So kinder to the now promoted and sixth grade class. So another data point that has some influence on the trajectory of the school has to do with kindergarten data. So this is the year that this was completed, and this is the upcoming school year. So we had one structured English immersion class and 3 DI classes. So this is what it consisted of in terms of inter-district transfers, and Lincoln English students. So I think at its peak it was 21 students, and then you had the 3 classes that consisted of this composition for dual immersion. So as I mentioned in a previous time that I addressed the board, in March 2006, when in my role as superintendent of human resources, I am charged with the task of giving the site administrators that are helping them complete their staffing configuration, and part of that is the preference form that teachers have to complete and identify what preference. So at that time, the information that was used to determine what classes would be available, so therefore they could identify their preference, was based on this. So as in March of 2016, earlier this year, we had for the structured English immersion 6 interested intros, 2 inters, and the 5 neighborhood students. So that being a total of 13. And you had, at that time, 30 intros, 20 inters, and 11. And so that was the information that was used to determine what classes could be offered at the time. So another context that I wanted to provide is how the demand of the immersion stands district-wide. So for the 2016-17 school year, we had over 300 inter-district transfers. Again, this is for families outside of the district boundaries, and of the 315, you had 68%, nearly 67%, inter requesting dual immersion, and this is district-wide. And then of those, Lincoln Elementary was a school of choice. So this is what's slated for the 16-17 school year for dual immersion classes at the various school sites that offer dual immersion: Ronda Meadows, Bronte Elementary Dual Immersion Academy, Lincoln, and Los Padres. The various number of classes, as you can see, also a dual immersion transitional kinder, and the number of students projected and actually registered for these schools, and some on a wait list. So another data point to consider is room for offering the various programs. So Lincoln Elementary has a particular challenge that its facilities would limit growth. At this point, the classrooms, there's 30 classrooms and they're all slated for use. So it's at 100% capacity, and which you need to consider about other programs that are being housed at Lincoln Elementary, which are those being, so that's something that needs to be considered, or another data point, where you have Monterey Park Elementary School, a school site less than 7/10 of a mile away with, that hasn't reached full capacity. It has 24 classrooms and 21 that are slated for use. So which brings us to the various options that could be considered for the various program options for this. We have three potential. So the first being maintaining the structured English immersion and dual immersion. The second being phasing in dual immersion, and that being a school-wide dual immersion school. And the third, which may not be a viable option, and it would take some time and planning to make this a viable option, would be a K-8 dual immersion school. And as you can see, each of the options list some points that you would consider. So that concludes my presentation, which, it's offering you various information about the history of Lincoln Elementary School and the various data points that you can utilize to consider the program options. So now I welcome any questions. From the board.
Oh, thank you. I liked.
Question?
Did you ask for questions from the board? Or?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if I have any questions, but I can say that when we changed the boundaries, or closed the school, we did change the boundaries a bit. And we took a number of Lincoln students, and they wound up at Roosevelt. And they are highly impacted. They've got lots of kids. And since that happened, the mining project went through, and it was built, and so there are a number of students there. I don't know how many, but there are quite a few there. And they're within walking distance of Lincoln. And, well, after we closed Lincoln, they walked, a lot of them walked to Roosevelt. I think there are some buses available.
We have buses.
But
I rode the bus and picked up kids there.
right, but I know when it first happened, a lot of those kids walked. They preferred to walk rather than ride the bus. And I don't know if they still do or not, but I know that's happened in the past. And, well, I just remember that we suggested, or some of the board members suggested, that we rewrite the boundaries so we could balance the schools better. And at that time, our superintendent said he didn't want the hassle. And the rest of the board went along with it. So, but we could certainly balance the populations if we redid the boundaries. That was my thought.
Thank you so much for that. That is absolutely true. We find board actions that actually define the boundaries in 205 with the closure of Lincoln School, but there's nothing that redefines those boundaries.
No,
and again, so what you said is key from my interviews with the administration that was involved at Lincoln School, was particularly not redefining those boundaries because they wanted to make it a school of choice. And so defining boundaries combines the school.
Yeah, it does.
And making it a school of choice makes it wide open to anybody from within the district. And as you can see from the data points, we have intra-district transfers into the site for our structured English immersion program placement. And we have intra-district transfers for our dual immersion program. So it really is in many ways operating as a school of choice, because we're offering that choice to our families throughout our district, and we're offering it to any families outside our district, which is governed by policies of what families that want to come in. For instance, there are preferences for employees in our district who live outside of our Salinas area that want their children to attend these schools. They can file an inter-district transfer and they get preference into these schools. And so again, but coming back to your point, reestablishing the boundaries to include certain areas that were at that time, from factual interviews that I've done, undesirable areas to that school was not something that the administration at that time wanted to do. They wanted to make it a school of choice.
ask all the questions, but I have a lot of questions, so.
That's ours.
You okay? I think I'm okay, unless I'm getting beamed up, you know. So on the report to the Board of Trustees, the analysis says since 2004, a dual immersion program at Lincoln was considered a viable option for increasing enrollment for students within and outside the district. So so I do see that was listed about the grants, the two-way immersion school, that it was actually selected as two-way immersion. From that language, I could see there were concerns at that time about the enrollment numbers at Lincoln. Am I correct? And I can see that from the data, that they were decreasing. Martha, from your conversations at that time, was a concern that Lincoln was having declining enrollment and didn't have enough students, and they were looking at other options in 2004. So
2004, when the Project Solito grant was, that was a document, I'm sorry, that was a document that came, that again, you know, I think we've spent hundreds of hours researching kind of the historical perspective on Lincoln School that I was never even aware of until probably just a few weeks ago, maybe the last 2 weeks. When we looked at that document, yes, it didn't cite in the project itself, in the language of the grant, that it was due to declining enrollment. It actually cited that it was looking for the expansion of the two-way. At that particular point in time, it was called two-way immersion, Spanish immersion, and they were looking at Lincoln as the site to move that two-way Spanish immersion program into there. And also University Park was the other school that was selected as a possible site. So it didn't really, you know, the documents I have do not state declining enrollment. They state a need for, to expand the two-way immersion.
But if I look in the board packet where you had the presentation, you show a clear decline from 721 all the way down to 495 when it closed. And in your analysis, you say in 2004 it was a way of increasing enrollment. Was that a way to increase the enrollment for Lincoln that was declining when it closed?
You know, I wasn't there. I heard bits and pieces.
Okay.
I know that.
It's just in the current. It's in the current analysis. Okay. So I have another question too as well. If Lincoln was selected when it was closed, totally understand they weren't able to do the plan in 2004, but when it reopened, why didn't it just reopen as a dual language immersion program?
I don't know the answer to that
No,
question.
I just wanted a choice. You know, you can either do dual language or.
But dual learning, it didn't start in 2008. Why didn't it start in 2008 if it was already identified with a grant to start as a way to increase enrollment for the school or the district or?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
going to speculate. Okay, speculate is that in order for any new program, whatever it is, regardless, in this particular case you're asking about dual immersion,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
The documents that we have kind of lead me to believe that it was in a very short time that the decision was made to reopen Lincoln School. Obviously, it was only 53 kids, so we have a letter that went out to the community, and I want to say it was, I can't remember, February, but I mean, it was like, you know, not a whole long time before they made that decision.
Okay.
So when you are implementing a school-wide program, you need time. And what we did find in our document research was that there were informational meetings in 2009, was it 2009? 2009. I don't have the packets in front of me, so don't quote me on these dates. But within the year that that school opened, there were informational meetings being held around the dual immersion program. So it didn't open with that, but immediately thereafter, there were informational meetings being held to the parent community and to different groups within our district.
Okay. So it sounds like from your research and talking with people, the decision to reopen Lincoln was made pretty quickly.
I don't know the documents to very spotty.
Spotty, okay, but it sounded like you had concerns about the short amount of time that a decision was made to reopen a school, because just to give historical perspective, in 2005, the district was actually second on the list for financial takeover. So I think that the district didn't really, if I was to speculate, given that it opened up 3 years later, the district didn't want to close a jewel like Lincoln, and they wanted to open it up. And I think it was a good thing to reopen it once the finances got better. But it sounds like decisions were made very quickly. Kind of like Operanda. Operanda was started, the construction started in January, and 3 months later, when it was said it was going to open up for a neighborhood school, specifically to impact, and the language was detrimental educational environments for schools that are approaching 900 kids, but yet nothing was talked about dual immersion. It was talked about reducing the educational effect. And they didn't say it, but because only schools are approaching 900 are Sherwood and Cameron. But 3 months later, the decision was made to open, which actually did nothing to reduce the enrollment for those impacted schools. So it was passed in a short amount of time, starting off saying one thing and leading to another. So going to another question I have. If we go to, sorry, I know that so there's data was given all the way up to June of 2016 for current enrollment. And then when kindergarten data was given, it still has March 2016. Why don't we have the current June or even May results of what currently the packets are for kindergartners? I also, in terms of all the data, we also, well, let me say one thing. I'm a little confused about the school choice thing because KSBW did a whole piece, and the superintendent and the current principal, when it was opened up, repeatedly said neighborhoods. School choice was never said. So that's why it can be confusing, because neighborhood, homeschool, school choice is used interchangeably. Oh, that was the question, sir. If you reopen Lincoln, and so whether there was concern about declining enrollment or not, and you decreased the boundaries informally because you didn't actually open them up. So what I'm hearing is that students from other areas were then not included in the new Lincoln, and it sounded like from Ms. Martinez you were saying that people didn't want some of there. I don't understand how you change if you open up a school that was closed, that maybe partially was because of declining enrollment, how you actually shrink the neighborhood, and then expect that it's going to be sustainable. We talked about, changing. There's in this packet about Lincoln, Monterey Park's brought up. So Monterey Park has too few kids, and now those kids from Lincoln are being sent to Monterey Park because there's a problem. It sounds like the district needs to look at the entire boundaries, because boundaries are there to fluctuate and change. And so some of those hodgepodges are because at some point they said, hey, you know what, we need these kids to go here to update the boundaries. But the question I have is that with all that confusion, how do I know that a kid who's in your data that says it's the home school of Lincoln is not necessarily, might live in the, whatever the boundaries would supposedly be, are not actually inter-district transfers? Because I've had parents that told me I'm 2 blocks away, and the way I got into Lincoln was an inter-district transfer because they told me I couldn't go there. So how many of these inter-district transfers do we know are students who were said to be going to Monterey Park, but really should have been considered Lincoln all along? Okay, I'm sorry. I just have a couple more questions. I know they might not be answered, but that's okay.
Lydia, you're not using the clock?
Okay,
Okay, Sean, you guys.
I thought is there limits on questions? I mean, you had a whole presentation, and I'm asking questions that
This is
are.
staff giving an order for the presentation.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
Not for you.
Okay.
For you, how'd you get so handsome? For you, Beatrice, what is it that, do you have any idea what caused this drastic drop in enrollment? I mean,
Are you kind of?
yeah, if you look at the slide.
So there's information we do not have. We don't have information on how many people in the Lincoln area are attending private schools. We know that, and particularly, I can tell you, I've met at least 3 or 4 parents, sets of parents at different events, at different places that live in Lincoln, and they specifically tell me that their kids are in private schools, and they've given me their reasons why. And so we don't have a data point, just, we don't know. We don't know what happened in here. I mean, I have
Are you talking
speculation.
district-wide?
Yeah, district-wide, like,
Yeah.
how is it a roller coaster like that?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about asking the same thing, you know, since I wasn't present here at the time. And it sounds like maybe some members of the audience know that we're here, but again, what Martha says, the speculating, and the individual, actually with Mary and I were having a conversation. And we're speculating that maybe it was, had to do with the housing market. And then people left, so then to go buy 2 houses in Fresno. And then you have them have to return home because of the, balloon and the recession. So that's what we were just speculating because we don't have anything documented that substantiates.
Well, I think what is really good, and if you want those records, we can go back to them. In 2005, with the closure of Lincoln School, the demographers came, they did the boundary study, there were professionals who do this as their jobs. They looked at projected, what was in line, what did they think was going to happen over years. They look at the housing market, they're looking at all of those things, and if you want those documents, we can certainly provide those to you. But I think what we probably need to focus on is where we are at.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I could say that we didn't close the school because of declining enrollment. We closed the school because we were out of money, period. We were going to be taken over by the state, and we tried to save the district by closing 2 schools. And that was not because it was declining enrollment there.
So for fiscal solvency.
Yeah, that was it.
Mr. Gard, you have a question?
Actually, I have more comments, if that's okay. I'll keep it to 3 minutes, if you want to set the time.
I think we're taking questions on this presentation right here.
Can we
Do you
get
have any
public
questions about
comment?
that?
Are you going to open up the item to public comment?
It's an informational item. They gave us information. I think we're asking questions about the information. You want to make public comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Brown Act requires it on every
That's
agenda
fine.
item.
Go ahead.
Oh, you started it. So Frank Gard mentioned, I know it's a polarizing issue, but I have an opinion. I hope that's okay. I've been going here for 2 years to these board meetings. I've seen a lot of people get up here and say, when they talk about dual immersion, they say, I'm not opposed to dual immersion, but, and you have to qualify their statement in that regard. Actually, on a personal note, we've seen a lot of interesting folks come out of the woodwork and accuse BBB of being anti-Latino and racist, and accuse us of going after Dr. Luza because he supports dual immersion. All these things have come out of left field that we've never said. And the truth is, I think dual immersion is a beautiful program in concept. And if you have the right resources to staff it, I don't think we do at this point. And when you have the right group of program participants who are doing it for all the right reasons. Now, as Sean said, Lincoln, you're saying, was open as a school of choice. That's not what was reported to the media. We saw the former superintendent say that this is being opened as a neighborhood school. Actually, I think the principal said that at the time. on the 2008 KSBW report. And now we have neighborhood families who are invested in their neighborhood school, who are essentially being pushed down. I know you're probably saying, well, why does he care? He goes to Mission Park, doesn't affect him. You know, we are a very all-inclusive group. I mean, there's certain advocates in this district who are not all-inclusive. And I'm speaking, of course, about the dual immersion program advocates that we've been learning about recently. They're not advocating for Los Padres and Veranda Meadows, more resources, smart boards, et cetera. When we stand up here and we're asking for like crossing guards, we're not speaking for Mission Park. We're speaking for the entire district. So that's the difference between us and them. And I'm just looking at all the evidence before us. There appears to be this agenda. And it's clear to me that this group is primarily made up of certain members of a certain industry who are pushing an agenda. And I don't appreciate that. I mean, basically, they're advocating for radio ads. Could that be possibly the reason why we have 315 inter-district transfer requests for the DI program? Why would you want to maintain the status quo as it is? Because obviously the status quo, this is one of the slides here, is not viable. I mean, you need to put as much emphasis into recruiting turnout, even if it means redrawing district lines, school boundaries, to sustain it as a neighborhood school. So obviously I take this a little personally because we were accused of things that we're not. And nobody has ever apologized on behalf of this district for organizing those community members to do that to us. So all this time you have this very elitist group out there who are calling, and you're organizing members of the community to call us elitists. I'm sorry this is coming out of left field, but it's been festering in my mind for quite some time, and you've put us through a lot of stuff that I didn't appreciate in the last 2 years. Oscar was the only one who stood up and said BBB is not racist, and this is a very divisive topic to talk about. So I'm sorry, I'm letting it all out now, probably, but that's just how I feel, and it is what it is. Do what you want, I guess. Thank you.
Can I ask a question of Ms. Childers? So what is the driving force behind dual language classes, opening up more classrooms? What is the specific driving force?
So I can speak to my role in terms of the current year and since I've been appointed in the current role. We use numbers, different data points to project classroom staffing projections, and I'm guided by the SCESD master agreement in the particular process that has to do with preference forms. So in March, and that was what the slide pointed to, was that in March, that information was what drove identifying the class option for the staff or any staff across the district to apply for any vacancies or to identify their state level choice and program.
Maybe what I'm asking is, this is not board driven, it's community driven, it's parent driven. Am I correct?
I can't speak to that in my.
Well, when I say the dual immersion program,
Well, I
it's
think it's driven by the applications you get for the program.
So yes, the offerings have to do with the number of students enrolled, and you know, my position, I have to abide by various parameters, not only the contract, but we also have to meet 33 class size targets, are penalized, and then we have to see what's the viable number of students to even open and offer a class. So at the time in March, the total number of SCI students was not enough to, you know, warrant an entire class. If you saw the slide, it was, I believe, 13 students. So that's what drove that. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I guess what you're asking me is how we offer the dual immersion classes, and it's based on a combination of things, whether it's students that are, you know, who attend the boundaries of the school site, which we have 4 dual immersion programs across the district, or Providence, from the Meadows, from the elementary, and Lincoln, and then the additional are insurance district. So all that combined determines, you know, we can offer the courses at the site. And as you can see, there are sometimes such an interest that we have waiting lists. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, I do want to just comment. Francisco, that dual immersion program, I think, personally, just from experience, has gained momentum over the last 10 years as a viable option for increasing biliteracy. And in some districts, they have up to 3 to 4 languages offered at different school sites. And so I think because it's become, it's research-based, number one, to yield positive results. I think biliteracy, global literacy, has been a very hot topic in the educational circles in terms of creating opportunities for our children to be more than just monolingual. So the dual immersion model right now in the US actually seems to be kind of the force that is more accepted and showing greater results. So I don't know, I think the community.
So what I'm getting at is we are accommodating the wishes of the stakeholders.
Yes, any student that's enrolled in dual immersion is by application, and they choose that as opposed to not.
I can also say that last year when I got here, it was pretty chaotic the first month. There was nobody in HR. Enrollment process was not being followed. We reestablished an enrollment process this year that followed our board policies. At least, we got that far. But there was a stack of inter-district transfers. I remember in the HR department, and Tina kept asking me, what are you going to say? Because these parents are calling us up and want to know where their placement is. And I said, finally, at one point in time, I said, look, we haven't even hired enough teachers to fill all of our regular classrooms. We cannot establish any more classrooms right now, so say no. So how many of those applications got rejected? I don't know. We were busy trying to hire teachers to fill the vacancies within our classrooms. And so this year, because of that experience, we tried to formulate a process that was much more logical, that followed the board policy for enrollment, and we even established a lottery process if we needed to go in that direction. And so you're right, we saw the growing demand. We pretty much ignored it last year because we just didn't have the resources to deal with it. And so we're trying to create a fair process, and we're looking at those numbers that are being shown to you today, because we actually met the timelines that were outlined in our board policies this year for enrollment, for inter-district transfers. So the goal was to inform parents on a timely basis of their placement, rather than letting them know midsummer or the week before school started where they would be. And that's what drove this whole discussion around looking at what the projection was for enrollment for that kinder, when we only had 5 applications at that particular time from that surrounding area around Lincoln School.
Sir, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to be quick because I need a shower and I'm really hungry. I came from work today. My son, we live at 221 Pine Street and right around the corner from Lincoln. I would really love to see at least one English class. I cannot help him with the Spanish, and I am very devoted, much like my parents were, towards his education. I want to be a part of it. The teacher is not there to teach my student. I am there to help teach my student. So I'm there to help when it's needed, but I will not be able to probably help him as much with Spanish. I learned work in construction. Spanish I learned is not the construction he needs to know. And I would absolutely love to walk him to school too. I do not want to drive him to school.
Can you state your name?
Nick Stowe. Just want to ask of you guys to consider. My neighbor has kids too. I know my son is only 7 months, so there's a few years until he gets there, but I want to be involved in knowing that hopefully there is something that will still be there for him and we don't have to go somewhere else. Am I opposed to dual immersion? I don't know enough about it to tell you guys that I don't like it. But from what I understand of what I went through in Prunedale, I do not agree with it because because I was put very, very far behind in my education. Until my parents put me in private school, I was really bad off as far as going to college or anywhere else. Once I was in private school, I went all the way through college and everything, got my degree, and now I'm putting some of it to use. But speaking as from the community, I just want to say, please keep at least an English class because I want to be able to help. So, I'm sure that's enough, and y'all have a great night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oscar Ramos, DC. Now, as VP, I wasn't as aware as Carol Rodriguez was about the problems at Lincoln, but what I did know was that everyone else knows. They've had principal after principal after principal. I also know that there's problems with the staff, there's infighting. I also know there's groups of parents fighting. It doesn't happen at other emergent schools. It doesn't happen at the new Blondin Meadows. It doesn't happen at Los Padres. So I'm not taking an official stand. SCESD is not taking a side, at least not yet. If it continues to affect teachers and eventually trickles down to the students, then we might. But as of now, those are the questions I'm asking myself. Why just at Lincoln? I'm sure everyone has their theories. I don't want to state my theory, but these are questions we should all be asking. Why only at Lincoln? And if it's affecting the teachers and eventually the students, we should do something.
I'm Finley Asmuth. I have a incoming fourth grader and sixth grader. They're both in the dual DI program since it started. And I just wanted to, just something for you to think about. I've been a teacher for 21 years, and we currently have, I keep hearing per se projected numbers is what you look at. And yes, when there were only 5 kids, I could say, oh, projected, wow, we might want to shut down the SEI. But at the moment, you have 20 enrolled. And in 21 years of teaching, I have never, ever gotten a class where I was slated, oh, you're slated for 25 kids. And maybe the first day of school I have 22, but never within the first week have I been lower than that. It's always the opposite. They add and add and add. There are always people that come out of the woodwork, oops, I never registered my kid. It's time for kindergarten. Let's just go. So I'm sure the extra 4 kids to make up a full-size class, I would assume, you know, at least in my experience, in my track record, would show up. So that's something to consider before you just completely shut down and make, you know, people like Nick just have to go elsewhere. So just something to consider.
Rosie Sanchez with CSEA. I was around back in 2005 when Lincoln closed, and it was devastating for the community, for everyone, for the staff, employees, for everyone. When we heard Lincoln was going to open again, we were excited, we were happy for everyone involved as well. And so as I was sitting here listening to all of this, and then when Mr. Garden came up and said, you know, he wanted to make some comments, and then you said only questions, and then I became confused. What time is this, questions or comments? So in order for me to comment, I'll form it in a question.